Insensitive brother-in-law picked me up, and under the guise of piety made me touch my father's dead face, and he made sure to lean my face so that it came close to the cold, immobile, dead face of my father. And I had my first sniff of death. The poet, I think, was born at that moment. I wrote my first poem to a teacher by the name of Miss Benjamin. I don't think I was more than 11 years old at the time, but she was very beautiful. She had red cheeks and large brown eyes and beautiful, beautiful brown hair, very curly. Very fascinating, and I had my first lust for her. She dances like a solitary bacchante. The tight miniskirt she flicks before my eyes is a leopard's ever-changing spots. On the crowded dance floor, she dances like someone possessed, and I am lost to all except the motion of her disordering limbs. When she dances like that, I can follow her down, all the way down into the smoky bowels of hell. I've always been, of course, more than fascinated by women. The relationship between poetry and sex, between poet and woman, to put it in more immediate and concrete terms, is a very intimate one. I don't know if any poet has not been inspired by women. Those that are not inspired by women, I've always felt, are very minor poets. Your great poets, your Shakespeares and Dantes, have always felt the strange magic of women. What women do to put the poet in touch with his unconscious, to enlarge his awareness of life. Years ago, I met the great German poet Erich Kästner in Berlin. And as we sat down to have a beer, the first thing he said to me was, and I'll never forget his words, "Layton, remember, woman is life." I've never forgotten those words. I think those are the truest words ever spoken by any poet. And a poet knows that. And so when I look at a young poet or I read a young poet, I want to see whether he's aware of beauty and death and the power of women, of sexuality. These are the three things. That's the Holy Trinity for me. In any poet, in any poet's soul. After a volcano erupts, ornaments and charms are shaped from the boiling lava, propelled down mountainside and slope. You can buy them for a song in Sicily or Yucatan to wear as a talisman on bared arm or wrist. So have I made poems from the black, scalding dross that poured out from my raging breast. Take whatever you wish or can, but don't overlook those with a harsh, singular beauty in their carved nakedness. The poem is the carved nakedness after the dross of human emotions, of vengefulness, malice, hate, greed. That's a poem that I wrote about a year and a half ago. It has a great deal of meaning for me. It's about love and the destruction of love. Because that's what the crucifixion is all about. The most profound symbol in our civilization is that of the Christ lying or standing crucified on the cross. He's a symbol of love. And what we have been doing as human beings is to crucify love. That's the most potent symbol, I think, in our civilization. The critic George Steiner recommends silence as the only answer to the Holocaust. I disagree. I disagree violently. It's a cop-out. Silence is not the answer to the atrocities of the Holocaust. As human beings, we have to try to understand the meanings embedded in that human ash in Auschwitz and Majdanek. We have to. And silence is no answer at all. I have written poems out of the pain and grief and the attempt to understand what the deliberate murders of 6 million people, of whom 1.5 million were innocent children. Eine kleine Nachtmusik. And was not there when you ripped open the bellies of pregnant women, or when you laughed uproariously at the specters clawing one another for offal. I was not there when you made skeletons dance for you and grief-crazed Jewesses to sing. If you're dead, you're beyond my curses and contempts, inviolable as a jackal's calcified turd. But alive and still insurable, you're probably in Obersalzberg, letting Mozart ravish your souls. Or in Budapest, Vilna, Cologne, buying sausages, perhaps Christmas toys for your grandchildren. Why not? Since power is the world standard, it's your victims, not you, who feel besmirched and guilty. Ah, meine Herren, we live in a time when atrocity is the norm and survival the sole merit. In 1980, everyone lives with some gas in his lungs. No one will die of it. For me, there you have it, beauty and death. They are the things that have obsessed me all my life. Beauty, the beauty that I talked about, Miss Benjamin's flushed red cheeks and her large, wonderful, warm brown eyes, palpitating with life, the promise of life and vitality, the fulfillment of life and vitality, and death that ends it all. And these two images given to me very early, the death of my cat, the death of my father, my brother, the beauty of Miss Benjamin, and of the little girls that attracted me, Jenny Fleischman, Jenny Siegel, all that. And these are opposites. They are contradictions. They are contraries. And they exist side by side. And these are the things that obsess the poet, trying to reconcile them, trying to understand what they mean. My father's piety and rectitude certainly influenced me a great deal. My father was a devoutly pious man. And when he retired to the bedroom, which he had made into a sanctuary, where he entertained God's messengers, he was for me an image of someone who transcended this world. Its cares, its griefs, its greeds, its avarice, its competitiveness, all that. He gave me the image of a pure world. But along with my father's rectitude and piety, there was Tom Mix. And Tom Mix influenced me just as much as my father did. But when I went to see a Tom Mix film, there was Tom Mix, sometimes the Lone Ranger, who fought for justice, who fought to defend, indeed, the orphans and the widows against unjust gangs and villains. So here we have The Lone Ranger, and that's the title of this poem. Stranger, keep your six-shooter handy. The only justice you'll ever see comes smoking out of its barrels. In Gulch Valley, the sheriff's always stoned. Anyway, in the fur-lined pocket of Joe Mucho, the saloon keeper. Though justice haunts the fevered brains of prophets and poets, teases like a half-remembered dream, in the real world of rustlers and flap-eared knaves, it swings to the ring of their silver dollars. The citizens? Bah. They're too scared to do anything about their notions of right and wrong. They'll moan and groan and wish the killings don't take too long so they can go back to feeling decent, honorable folk again. Only the Lone Ranger's footfall makes the corrupt judge shudder, gives him bad dreams. Poems are his silver bullets, sizzling quatrains, a burst of couplets. When he shoots them into the air to scatter the massing shadows, they drop from the clouds on varmint and huckster, chilling them into a still life forever. For me, the poet is someone who is willing to take risks. He's willing to pay the price for his good poems, and even a greater price for his best poems. He knows that great poetry comes out of suffering and chaos. Suffering and chaos. The poet's life is tragic in some ways, in many ways, because the poet finds it very difficult to distinguish, almost impossibly difficult to distinguish between words and reality, mistaking the one for the other. He is someone who's intoxicated by language. As a drunkard might be intoxicated by liquor, the poet is intoxicated by words. And his tragedy lies in the fact that he mistakes the one for the other. My interest in the arts, now we're using one of these phrases that I say we shouldn't use, but really, all of art is a defiance of death. Man hates the notion that he is nothing but a puff of smoke. He is nothing but a whisper in a whirlwind, or if you want to be vulgar, a belch in a whirlwind. And he's forgotten. He's an autumn leaf, or he's a summer leaf ripening to beauty and color, and then the wind comes and blows him away. And he can't accept that. He hates the notion that he, with his marvelous ego, his brain, his consciousness, and his conscience, nevertheless is marked out even as a lowly worm for death, and he cannot accept it. The Miltons and the Dantes and the Shakespeares did more than merely entertain. They told us something profoundly true about the human soul, its capacity for love and vindictiveness and hate and self-redemption. These are the poets that thrill us and will continue to thrill us. The sociologist and the historian have clumsy fingers compared to the poets. There is no surrogate for intuition and for imagination.